Good morning. Welcome to today's devotional. We're in Hebrews chapter 11. We've been looking at the subject of faith and we're going to continue to do so. So let's look at verse 29. By faith, they passed through the Red Sea as by dry land, whereas the Egyptians, attempting to do so, were drowned. And obviously this carries on the story of the Exodus, the first Passover that we looked at last time, when the people of Israel had to sacrifice a lamb and had to take some of the blood of the lamb and apply it to the lintels and the doorposts of their houses. And the promise was that the Lord would see the blood and that judgment would pass over their homes. And so they were spared from that terrible judgment, the death of the firstborn in the land of Egypt. And subsequently we see that they left, or they were on their way out of Egypt, and they begin their journey, their exodus from Egypt. And then they come to an obstacle, and that obstacle is the Red Sea. And it says here, by faith they passed through the Red Sea as by dry land. And I want you to think about that for a moment. Think about the facing an obstacle like that. And it's not just that they were facing an obstacle ahead of them, but that the Pharaoh's armies were in pursuit behind them. And so they got nowhere to go, in effect. They were completely vulnerable. They'd seen the miracles that had taken place in the land of Egypt. They'd seen the judgments upon Egypt. They'd seen the hand of the Lord, the power of the Lord. But as they started their journey, they were going to need to trust in Him even more. And we know, sadly, that journey, the majority of them would not finish that journey, would not persevere in the faith. And that was what was tragic, especially when you think about the things that they saw right at the outset of that journey. And we know the story that they cry out to the Lord as they know that the Egyptian armies are closing in on them. They cry out to the Lord, and the Lord tells Moses to raise his rod. And that night, the Bible tells us that an east wind came from the Lord, and it blew and divided the sea. And that the people of Israel, they had to take those steps. And I want you to put yourself in their place as they're taking those steps. Each step is a step of obedience and faith. The Bible says they were surrounded on both sides by walls of water. And you can imagine what that must have felt like. You know, they're being surrounded by death, and what was keeping them is faith. Every step, a step of faith. And what's more, the further they went on this journey, the more they realized there was no turning back. You know, there was no turning back. And they had to keep going forward. They had to keep trusting that the Lord would keep His promise, that the Lord would keep those walls of water away from these Israelites. And the truth is that they come through. They come through. And I want to encourage you, maybe you feel as though you're facing a great obstacle. And your faith is being tested. And it looks as though you could be overwhelmed at any moment. But I just want to encourage you to keep going, keep trusting in God. Yes, it looks impossible sometimes. Just as I'm sure it looked impossible to the people of Israel as they looked out on the Red Sea and realized there was no way forward unless the Lord made that way. And as they realized they were being pursued from behind by their enemies, it looked as though they could be overwhelmed either way. But they came through it because they trusted God and they were obedient to God. And that's the point here. It's shifted, the focus has shifted from Moses individually now to they. Now to the people of Israel. And it says that they passed through the Red Sea as by dry land. That's a miracle in itself, isn't it? You know, they went through as by dry land. Why? Because God is powerful, God is sufficient, God is faithful. Whereas the Egyptians, attempting to do so, were drowned. Of course they were. Of course they were drowned. They were not people of faith. There were people who were in rebellion against God and against his people, hell-bent on destroying his people. And that place that became a place of deliverance for the Israelites became a place of judgment, became a grave for those in rebellion. And so great lessons for us, folks, as we think about our own journey of faith. No matter what you're facing, keep going. Keep going. No matter how impossible it looks, know that God is sovereign over all things. Nothing is impossible for God. Let's keep trusting him. Let's keep walking in obedience and faith. And most importantly, keep persevering. Don't give up. May God bless you. Have a wonderful day.